So good, so good. Well, welcome. My name is Alan, and it's so exciting to be with you all today. Who has some kids who are over there enjoying Candy Palooza this morning? I promise you they're going to be better for it. They're going to have such a wonderful time over there. It was so cool. Most of you were like, can we just do that instead? But I believe that the Lord had something special for us this morning, right out of our series as we chart through the Gospel of John. This series is called The Gospel of Jesus, and every week we've been looking at a different chapter from Scripture inside the book of John. And this week, we just happen to be in John chapter 6. Now, many of you have heard this story before, and many of you may not have actually read this story at all. But there is one story that we are about to read that shows up in all four gospel accounts: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Many of the stories are unique to each of those authors, but there is only one story other than Jesus' resurrection that shows up in all four. And that's the story we're about to read today. Let's go to John 6, verse 1. John 6, verse 1. If you got it, say, I got it. If you need more time, say, hold up. I just heard a I don't know what that means, so we're going to press ahead. John 6, verse 1. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with the disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than a half year's wages to buy enough for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they were intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. This is the story of the feeding of the 5,000. We want to chart through this and see what's in here for each of us, because this is many people's favorite miracle that Jesus does. It's really interesting what all happens here. And as what all happens here in this story goes down, many of us can find certain things that we relate to in the text. Jesus, he gathers his disciples, and as they are seated all around, they see this great crowd coming at them. It's 5,000 men, and we believe that if everybody, brought a significant other and an offspring, then we would have 15,000 people here. And so Jesus asks this question: where ought we go to buy them something to eat? And instantly Philip responds with this answer. Jesus says where, and Philip responds with how. Anytime God gets ready to do something in our life, usually we're asking how. Anytime God gets ready to start something in your story, you usually look at everything you've got and you say, how? I want to tee up this one word that I think defines what Philip is experiencing in the story. And that word is something that you and I all face if we're really honest. No matter how saved you are and how long you've been walking with Jesus, there's one word that Philip is wrestling with in the story, and that word is doubt. Where can we go to buy all the bread for these people to eat? And he said, how do you believe that we can do that? That would take over 6 months of the money that we've got for everybody to just have one bite. It's a clear indication that Philip has doubt. Doubt, it's the feeling of uncertainty about life as we know it. Doubt deals different thoughts to each of us. It sounds unique depending on what you're going through. Some of it sounds like this: I doubt that I'll ever be enough. I doubt that I'll ever have enough. I doubt that God can accept me as I am. I doubt that God could use me. I doubt that I have what it takes to overcome. And if we're really honest, we all are living right now with a little bit of doubt in our own personal story. It comes to you in different ways, but there's uncertainty about the future because doubt simply sees the need and the demand and looks at what we have and says the demand is greater than the supply. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not sure if we're going to make it out of this. I know the facts. The facts are this doesn't really add up. And Philip is asked this question, and he's trying to figure it out. Philip's unsure about the plan. He doubts if it's going to work. And the truth of the matter is, it can't work if it's up to Philip to figure out. The first truth is that it can't work if it all rides on Philip. It can't happen, and his doubts would be justified if Philip's the one who has to provide for 5,000 men plus women and children. It is exactly right here that Jesus wants to say his first thing through this story. It won't work if Philip is the one in charge. Why? Because this won't work without Jesus. Let me say it again. Whatever you're looking at in your life right now, whatever you're staring at in this moment, whatever you're facing right now, when all the finances have dried up, when all of it is on your shoulders, when you've tried every single option, when you have come to your wits' end, it cannot work if it's up to you. This thing called life will never work without Jesus. But you know what's beautiful about this is that Jesus wants to come right here in the middle of the doubt. It's like Jesus wants to show off in a surprise sort of way. I know this to be true because verse 6 tells us that John's giving a little commentary on Jesus' thought process. Like, Jesus doesn't say something, but John, who is in the story watching all going on, he's writing down some commentary about what Jesus is thinking. Jesus is thinking something because he asks him this. He says, Jesus asked Philip in verse 6 this question only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Where are we going to go to feed him? He's got the wrong answer. It's okay. For he already had in mind what he was going to do. For he already had a plan that he was going to prosper them. For he already had a hope and a future that was secure. For he already had a surprise party that they were unaware of. And he only asked them this just so that they could do the math. Because he's in control the whole time. He asked this because he knows what he wants to do. He asked this because he wants to bless them. He asked this so that it will be an uncommon burden. And once it becomes an uncommon burden, it will lead to an uncommon blessing. That means anytime in life that you are faced with uncommon burdens and you are having doubt in the situation, when you get up to Jesus, he's going, I already have in mind something I want to do. And it's an uncommon blessing that will be a result of the burden that we face. I already have in mind what I want to do. Sometimes Jesus just wants you to do the math to show you at the beginning that we don't have what it takes. In and of ourselves, doubt, it sounds like this phrase, my best isn't good enough. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like this phrase, my best isn't good enough. That's what doubt tries to tell us. And the whole reason that Jesus wants him to do the math is so that he can look at where they are and that he can trust on God and he can move from doubt to one more word, dependence. He wants to move Philip and he wants to move us from doubt to dependence. That it is through dependence that he begins to see, I don't have what it takes. This won't work without Jesus. But we need something and we'll have to depend on him. And so what happens is they find this little boy. But here's what's wild about this whole story is they are multiplying 5 barley loaves. 5. Last week we talked about 5 being the number of grace. And now we see this number showing back up in the scripture. 5. 5 barley loaves. Barley is the first thing harvested in the springtime. And since the Passover festival is happening, nothing is wasted in scripture. They're giving us all the clues we need to understand what's going on. The Passover festival was happening while Jesus was performing this miracle. That festival was a celebration and a feast of the Jewish people being delivered out of Egypt. And they would reminisce on the manna that came from heaven. And as they reminisced on the manna that came from heaven, that story says that there was Moses who was taking the people through Egypt. And as they would wake up every morning, there would be fresh bread from heaven that would be on the ground. And they would have to eat that bread. And every day, they weren't sure, sounds a little bit like doubt, if there would be more bread the following day. And it would spoil in 24 hours. And so every day that they woke up, they were forced to depend on God for the manna from heaven as they were traveling through the wilderness. Moses said, there will be one that comes after me who will be raised up a prophet from our nation that you can trust and depend on. And what Jesus is saying through this story is he says, I am, without even having to say it, I am him. Because from the first 5 barley loaves, that represents the first 5 books of the Old Testament. That's called the Torah. And he is now making a metaphor saying that as the people depended on God in the wilderness, now he's sitting on the edge of the wilderness and he is saying, now you can depend on me. This is why he teaches his disciples to pray, give us today our daily. He is making an entire metaphor. Watch, as everybody gets as much as they want to eat, everybody's stomach is full of the same thing. Later on in chapter 6, the same chapter we're in, Jesus will say, for I am the bread of life. And so what he is saying is that when you have doubt and when you are faced with a great obstacle and there is nothing you can do, he's saying you will have to depend on me, you will have to rely on me, you will have to trust in me, and I will be more than enough. And when you come to me, it will give me this day my daily bread. And every day that you wake up, there's a little bit of doubt of, will he do it today? Is today going to turn out like I hoped it would? And he goes, hey, not if you don't depend on me, because then it's all up to you. Then the miracle is all on your shoulders to bear. It's this idea of giving us today our daily bread. He does the math. He's having to depend on Jesus. And this is something that I'm wrestling with right now, if I just be vulnerable for a moment. I don't like that Jesus does this, but I didn't write it. And so it's here to speak to us. It says that Jesus said in verse 10, have the people sit down. And Jesus took the loaves and he gave thanks. Okay? Jesus took the loaves and he gave thanks. Jesus took the loaves. They're depending on him. They're relying on him. They're trusting in him. No bread is multiplied. No bread has created more bread yet. There is no more fish. There is no more loaves. There is 2 fish. There is 5 loaves. He takes the bread. And before the miracle happens, before breakthrough occurs, before outbreak, before overflow, before abundance, still in the middle of lack, still in the middle of need, still in the middle of scarcity, still in the middle of not enough, still in the middle of doubt, still in the middle of fear, still in the middle of the messy middle before the miracle, he's grateful for what he has. What if every day you go, God, that which I have, it's 2 fish and 5 loaves. It doesn't meet everything that I need. I understand, but I want to thank you in advance. I want to thank you on the front side. I want to be grateful so that in my gratitude, I can eliminate doubt and depend on you and put faith in you. Can we give God thanks in advance before we get the miracle that we're looking for on the backside? That speaks to me so much because I wrestle with depressive thoughts all the time about like, why God, and I don't know if I'm enough, and this and this sermon doesn't even make sense to nobody, and I'm just not sure, and maybe it'll work, maybe somebody will come to church today, maybe they won't, I don't know, and I'm just like, God, that I have, I give to you. Thank you. Thank you for the blessing. I hadn't seen anything yet. I hadn't seen, you're not a fortune teller. You're not a future caster. Jesus gives thanks to God before he ever multiplies a single piece of bread or a fish. Who are we? See, it's easy to be grateful in big seasons. At the end of the story, Jesus, you did what? Thank you, Jesus. And he says, I want you to have that same level of gratitude on the front side before I even get started. Before I distribute one thing. When you wake up every single day, you go, this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and I'll be what? I'll be glad in it. So God, that I have, I understand. In and of itself, it's not enough. But I give you thanks. And somewhere in that, now I'm depending on you because why? Because it's not in my hands anymore. It's not in my hands anymore. It's in his hands. It's now passed through mine. What God can get through you, God will get to you. And when we can get it out of our hands and into his, sometimes that's why the business is not working. God says, you still hang on to it. I'm over here off to the side. Where are you going to feed all those people from, huh? Where are you going to buy them all that bread? What? He goes, I take more than half a year's wages. And God's like, yeah, I know. Yep. And as soon as you want to turn it over to me and you want to honor God with that business, and you want to get on your knees and pray, and you want to tithe off the business, and you want to actually put it before God, there'll be uncommon blessing. But if it's all up to you, you can cut the crackers this way. Let's see. You can bite it off like that. Jesus over there giving you instruction, just mocking you. He's like, maybe if you give everybody just a sliver of that fish, they might. It's here to teach us that we're not getting out of this life without first depending on God. That's the only way to eliminate doubt. And what I don't like about the story either is that the disciples had already been walking with Jesus for a little bit. They had seen signs, wonders, miracles. They had just seen the healing of the paralytic for 38 years. They had already seen God do certain things. But yet, they still doubt in this one moment if God really is enough. Because doubt oftentimes is less about yourself and it's more about God. Think about it. You think, I don't know if God can. And once you get past the God can part, you start saying, I know that God can, I just don't know that he will, for me. So I want to depend on you, but I just am not so sure. I know you can. I've heard you do it for others, and my faith level stops at can, and God's saying your faith level has to go to will. I know he can, and I know he will. And many of us have followed Jesus, and we just kind of quit believing. That's why we sang the song, More Than Able. When did I start to believe that God cannot do what I've read in this book? When did I get comfortable in this and slowly see slips of dependence on him? I just want you and I to be like the little boy in the story. That's where deliverance takes place. From doubt to dependence to delivery. See, delivery is the last part. Everything leading up to this is the hard stuff. Delivery is the easy part. God has systems of delivering and distributing it. But I want you to think about what you have. And the little boy knows it's 2 fish and 5 loaves. He knows it can't feed all the people in the room. There's no way. But Andrew sees the little boy, and he has this idea that if he can get this sack lunch from the little boy, that he can get it to Jesus, and Jesus can do something great with it. And I just don't know why the little boy is the only one who packed a lunch the whole day. I guess he was at home, and his mom's like, where are you going today? And he's like, well, I'm going to be with Jesus, and I'm going to pack a lunch and just listen to him talk up there for a while up there on the hillside. And I can just imagine her saying, well, you don't need to pack a lunch. Jesus is going to take care of everything. It's going to be fine. You don't have to do that. Your Aunt Agnes was with him last week at a wedding, and he turned water into wine. Said that was the best stuff she ever had. He said all kinds of good stuff. Yeah. And so here comes this little boy. This little sack lunch. And he brings it. He's carrying it. It's just this small little idea. You got to have childlike faith. I think that's why it's a child who's the one who is illuminated in the story. And so he gives over this sack lunch to Jesus. Gives it over. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I'm really not sure, but I mean, that I do have. I brought something. I brought a little bit. I brought what I have, and I want to give it to you. The question is, what do you have? What do you have? Some of you, what you had was just showing up today. That's depending on God. It's a significant indicator of your dependence on him, and you're like, I don't know if I have everything that I'm supposed to have, but you know what I do have? I have church attendance today. That's what I have. Some of you are like, I don't know, I'm moving on and I'm serving the church and I don't feel all that great. I'm not all fully healed and whole, but you know what I have? Today I'm a door greeter. Today I'm a kids worker in Candy Palooza. Today I give you what I have. When you give him what you have, here's where it gets wild. The little boy hands him the lunch. Jesus gives thanks. And this stuff starts getting delivered all over this place. And if you and I are the little boy, I know I didn't give him that. I gave him that, but I didn't give him that. He's now doing more with what I brought than I could ever do in my own power. Because once the little boy gives him what he has, he's now able to see the abundance and the overflow and the delivery of God throughout all these people and on his life. Just imagine being the little boy. For just a minute, just imagine. He knows that Jesus blessed it and he broke it. And then it says the disciples began to work it and began to pass it out. And imagine it. He's seeing that it's going from the disciples to all these people. And he's going, what in the world? I know there's only 2 fish in there. Why is there umpteen jillion out there flopping around everywhere? Listen to me, Vivid Church, this is a season where I believe we're walking into this right here. When was the last time that your neck had to turn because of what God did in your life? Because of what God did in your business? Because of what God did in your family? Because of what God's doing in our church? Because of what God did in your prayer time? When was the last time that you had a crick in your neck because you were amazed at all that God did? And you know, I gave him a little bit and he blessed it and created an abundance. I started over here and what I have was less than what he's given back to me now. I want our whole church to just sit up like this for the next 10 years of our life and just go, we can be in awe and wonder at God's amazing work if you give him what you have. If you don't give him what you have, you never get to experience the abundance of God in your life. I think this is a miraculous season where everything that you are praying for is about to break loose. He already knows what he wants to do. He already knows what he's got in mind. For I know the plans I've got for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you, give you a hope and a future. I just want to live in the abundance, in the amazement, in the overflow, in the astonishment of God's miraculous multiplication on my life. What if that's where we could live? Which means the only reason he has you added up right now is so that you'll know on the backside of the story that it was only him who could do it. Which means what you have plus Jesus equals more than enough. What you have. What do you have to offer today? What do you have? We all have something. What you have plus Jesus equals more than enough. And don't get it twisted. If we don't plus Jesus, it ain't gonna work. So what you have all by yourself is not enough. It's not. But what you have when you hand it over to him and you give it to him and Jesus does what he does and it's no longer in your control, it's no longer in your hands, it will equal more than enough on your life. See, the problem is that some of us, we hand it to Jesus. Help me, sweetheart, right here. See, we hand it to Jesus. He hangs on to it for a minute and then we go, hang on, give me that back. No, I don't like what you did with it right there. If you hold it this way, okay, and then we instruct Jesus along the way and we're like, now I'm going to let you carry it one more time. And then we get insecure and we start doubting again and we're like, but I'm not sure that God can really do it. Hang on, give me that back. Give me that back. And we play this pass around game with our life with God. That's not real dependence. That's self-reliance. That's a form of self-reliance. And we start to instruct God about how he ought to work in our lives. And he's like, really? You want to tell me? how I ought to be blessing you to run your life? Really? I've seen them kids you got. You can barely take care of them. What you talking about? You're still carrying it. I'm talking total surrender. It's in his hands. He blesses it. I'm talking, it's all yours. I'm talking total dependence. I'm talking, I can't go another day, God. I just want to get it off of me and onto you. Because God will start to eliminate all that doubt, and faith will rise in you of, I got faith to believe that if he did it for them, he can do it for me. I've got faith to believe that if he said it, I believe it, that settles it. It's in his hands. I've got faith to believe for the impossible. I've got faith to believe. And now we start to watch God deliver stuff to us. I want to hear the stories that blow your mind. I want to hear the overflow blessing stories where you're like, delivery came and we didn't even know how it happened. All it is, then the overflow of God. But you got to give him what you have. Give him what you have. And then you get out of the way and you let God do the work. And some of us think we got to go get better before we can come to Jesus. Okay, what does better look like? You're missing the point. Imagine Andrew. He's the one with the idea and the little boy. Imagine for a moment, the little boy looks at Andrew and he goes, hey, mister, I got 2 fish and 5 loaves. And Andrew goes, okay, hey, Jesus, we got 2 fish and 5 loaves here. Give me some time to go get more. If you sit all the people down, I'll run into town. I know we're across the shore here. I'll get in the boat that you came over here. I'll go to the local bakery down the street. I'll make some more fresh bread. And imagine Andrew getting in the boat and say, little boy, where's the bakery? And he points and he's that direction, and he goes across and he gets into the bakery and he bakes all night long. He puts all the yeast and the dough and the flour and everything together, and he starts baking and he's 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 baking, and he goes, okay, I got 100 loaves. Puts it all into the thing, and he goes out there and he's like, on my way back, I'm gonna catch some fish. Okay. How many fish does he catch? Let's go 50. That'll work. I got 50 fish and 100 loaves. He pulls this big old honker up onto the shore, full of fish, full of bread. Okay, geez, I did all that I could. I got all the work. I got more than what we started with. We started with 2 fish, 5 loaves. I got 100 loaves. I got 50 fish. Okay, is that enough? If you give me one more day, disciples, come here. We're going to go to all the bakeries. We're going to go to all the bakeries in the city real quick. Let's do one more night. And they go and they get in the boat. They row across the lake. They go back, and all of them go to all these bakeries. They bake all night long. Baking. There's a few. They get systems down, structures. Boy, they got a figured out business plan. 5 catching fish, 5 making bread. They all come back to 2 just running security. I had to come up with 12, okay? They get back to the shore. Okay, Jesus, we multiplied our efforts together. We got it. Is there anybody dead yet? Y'all hadn't eaten in 3 days, okay? It took us all this while to get here, okay. Somebody had a coronary over there. All right, well, just wait a second, okay. Okay, here's all the bread, Jesus. We got 500 loaves. I know there's about 15,000 people here. We got 500 loaves. We got 250 fish. Guess what? Still not enough. And this is what you and I do. We go, Jesus, just wait a minute until I got it together. Just wait a minute till I go get more. Just wait a minute till I solve this crisis on my own. Just wait a minute before I become a Jesus follower. Let me clean myself up just a little bit more. I don't have anything to offer you, God. So let me go get more before I give you my life, before I give you my mind, before I give you my faith. This is the idea is my best isn't good enough. You realize the point of the story is this, that there was no lower increment we could go. 2 fish and 5 loaves. We're so used to that we barely realize the mathematical discrepancy here. That this was his best. This was all he had. This was the very best. And there's no instruction in the story to go retrieve more or do more or gain more before Jesus gets involved. And if the little boy and the disciples would have thought, this is my best, it's all I got, it's not good enough, then they would have worked harder, went overtime, done things that were not necessary. Because the lowest increment that he had was enough. Jesus says, I can work with that. I've worked with worse before. I worked in the beginning of time, ex nihilo, out of nothing. There I was with God, the Father, and the Holy Spirit, and there we were in the beginning of time. I've worked with worse before. We were down to nothing before the universe began, and boom, we spoke it and said, let there be, and the thing started to go. I've worked with worse before than what you have to bring, because nobody brought me anything to create the universe. Who told you had to go get right, get clean, get better before God gets to work on your life? And when we start thinking that my best isn't good enough, I gotta take you to the 2 fish and 5 loaves, because God's here to look back at you and change the sentence to say, my best is good enough. What if you lived every day? Jesus, I give you what you have. It's all I got today. My best. It's my very best. I know it's not much. My best, I believe, is good enough. When I get it in your hands, that you'll deliver on this, because you didn't ask me to go get anything else besides what I have. That's the point of the story. That your best is good enough for Jesus to begin to work with if you release it to him. That your best is good enough for the creator of the world. That your best looks like 2 fish and 5 loaves on most days. And Jesus says, I work miracles with little. And dependence on Jesus will equal deliverance from him. So you got to depend on him and give him what you have. And then get out of the way and let God get to work on your life. I want you to leave here knowing that your best is good enough when you give it to him. Thanks for watching. Head over to vividchurch.com so that you can stay updated with all things Vivid Church. Join us in person or online for one of the services so that you can be a part of our Vivid Church family. But don't stop there. Please share this video so that we can help other people live the vivid story that God has for them. Thank you.